Hey everyone, so this is the second video in our immunity section. And today we're going to be looking at a bit of an overview of the different components of the immune system. And this is going to help us prepare for the lessons coming up where you might recognize a few of the names and be able to know some of their functions, which will help later on down the track. So our learning intention for this video is to understand the roles of some of the components of the immune system and to know the difference between the innate and adaptive immune system. So the immune system, we've obviously got a highly complex immune system. It's very, adapted to the way that we've survived over the last however many years. And there are two divisions of our immune system. One is called the innate division and one is the adaptive division. So the innate system is our sort of very generalized response to pathogens. And it's conducted mainly by white blood cells known as leukocytes. So it's very general. It's how our body sort of attacks most things. We've also then got our adaptive immunity, which is much more specific, where it's targeted to a specific pathogen that's entering our body. And that's mainly conducted by white blood cells known as lymphocytes. So again, it's made of two divisions. One's very general and one is highly specific. So you can see this is a bit of a diagram showing some of the parts of our immune system. This isn't even all of it. There's heaps more cells involved. But you can see that it's divided up into our innate system and our adaptive system. And there is some crossover where they're sort of involved in both processes. We're going to break down the major ones that you guys need to know and go through their functions and hopefully sort of build up as we go over the next few lessons about what they actually do and how they work together. So the ones we're looking at today are cytokines, macrophages, dendritic cells, neutrophils, mast cells, something called the complement system, and T cells and B cells. So we're going to break down what each one does. And I reckon maybe taking some notes on what is the function of each one will really help. So cytokines, first of all, they're just a signaling molecule, and you can see they're involved in both the innate and adaptive immunity. So these are our ligands. And when we were talking about signaling molecules, this is the signaling molecule for the immune system. Now, cytokines is just the name for the category, but within cytokines, we've got cytokines such as interleukin, interferon, and growth factors. They're just examples of cytokines. And what their job is to do is to go to target cells and induce some sort of response by those other cells. So here you can see we've got a cell. Obviously, these are all pathogens, and it's now releasing cytokines. That might attract other cells to the area, might cause them to go through apoptosis. It's just an example of a signaling molecule in the immune system. The second one we're going to look at are macrophages. Now, these are involved in innate immunity, and their main job is to ingest or take in pathogens and destroy them through a process called phagocytosis. So you can see here, it takes in a bacteria, it combines them with lysosomes and starts breaking it down, and we end up actually discarding the leftovers of that bacteria. So this video here, you can see is a macrophage actually engulfing some bacteria and breaking it down through phagocytosis. They do also have a second role where they actually pass on information, but we'll get to that a little bit later on. It's through a process called antigen presenting. And next one up is the dendritic cell. Now, again, these are cells that will engulf through phagocytosis, but what their main role is to show off what they've engulfed on the outside of their cells. So you can see in this video, it's engulfed a pathogen, and it's going to start to break it down, and then it shows it off saying, hey, this was something I've encountered. And that's its major role, is antigen presenting. And we'll get to in the next video sort of how that actually works. The next one are neutrophils. Again, these are just part of our innate immune system. So they move throughout the blood and they go to the sites of infection and start engulfing the pathogens through phagocytosis. So you can see both macrophages, dendritic cells, and neutrophils all undergo phagocytosis. Okay. They also release cytokines, which are those ligands, which gets other cells to come to the area as well. And these guys actually work so hard that they actually die very quickly. And you notice that as pus. So when you've got an infection, say a cut on your finger and it's very pussy, that's because the neutrophils are actually working in that area to try and fight off the pathogen. Then they start to break down and form that pus that we know. The next ones are mast cells. Now, these are cells that when they encounter a pathogen, they release a chemical called histamine, which causes the blood vessels to dilate, which just means get bigger. And it actually attracts more of those phagocytes to the area. So they're almost like an alarm system. So if they've encountered something, they're going to send out histamine, which will actually cause more and more cells to get to the area. You may notice the term histamine because when you have something like hay fever, it's because your mast cells are releasing too much. And so you would take an antihistamine to try and balance out the effects of what they're doing. So as I said, these ones' primary role is just to release histamine, which promotes inflammation and greater blood vessel movement. So again, just touching on there with the allergic response. So when we have an allergic response, our mast cells are overactivated. And so taking antihistamine sort of balances out their effect. The next one is the complement system. Now, this is again part of innate immunity. So it's very general, it's not specific. And they're just a group of proteins which either help phagocytes work, so they might help a macrophage go and take a pathogen on, but they also start to damage the membranes of pathogens. So if a bacteria entered, some of these proteins would actually go and attach to the membrane of the bacteria and start to break it down. So again, it's still very generalized. They're not attacking a specific pathogen, it's a general response. When we start moving into the more specific cells, we start talking about adaptive immunity. So B cells, there's a variety of different types of B cells, but for example, B plasma cells, they release antibodies, and those antibodies are highly specific to whatever pathogen. So say, for example, if we were going to make antibodies for the common flu, influenza virus, the B plasma cells make specific antibodies that will only attack the influenza virus. So they're not generalized, they're very, very specific. We also then have B memory cells, and they're cells that stick around for a long, long time after an infection that help us, I guess, recognize the pathogen if we encounter again. That's why when you take, say, something like a measles vaccine, those memory cells store that so that you won't get measles again. So we get to how vaccines work with memory a little bit later on this term as well. The last one are T cells. And again, part of the adaptive immune system. And there's a variety of different T cells again. So they're much more specific. We've got cytotoxic T cells, and they cause other cells to undergo apoptosis. So you can see we possibly have a T cell here telling this cell to undergo apoptosis. We've got helper T cells, and they just go and help other cells in the adaptive system. We'll get to these a little bit later on how they work as well. And then again, you've got memory T cells, so they can remember pathogens for future. We do a lot coming up on B cells and T cells. So the general understanding today is all that's needed. We'll go through how each of these specific ones work in the coming weeks. So just to review, we've got an immune system, obviously, which is either innate, which is very general, or adaptive, which is highly specific. And they're made up of many different cells and systems, which each have their own roles. The ones that we're going to get to that are the most high complex ones are the B and T cells, and they're involved in our adaptive system. But for this video, all you need to just have down is what is the general function of each of those components, and we'll sort of piece those pieces together over the next few weeks. Hope this video helps. Thanks.